Welcome to Empowered Living. I'm Ann Shu. On this podcast, innovative leaders and visionary experts share insights and practical tools for work, family, and marriage. Each episode, we'll explore how to elevate your life while staying grounded in what truly matters to you. You're working hard to navigate relationships, build a thriving family, and create a legacy of purpose. We're here to help you do that with confidence and intentionality. So if you're ready to live a life by design, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Empowered Living, the podcast where we explore the habits and conversations that help us build more intentional, resilient lives. I'm your host, Ann Shu, and today we're talking about a topic that shapes our marriages, our businesses, and our leadership. But most of us were never taught how to talk about it: money. My guest is Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, author of Breaking Money Silence, and she's spent decades helping couples and leaders turn awkward money moments into confident conversations. Kathleen explains what money silence actually is, where it comes from, and why nearly all of us have hidden money scripts that drive how we save, spend, invest, and negotiate. We go practical. You'll hear how to spot your own money scripts and your partner's money scripts, and you'll learn a 5-minute judgment-free conversation that you can have with your spouse tonight to shift unhelpful money thoughts. Whether you're building a business, leading a team, or trying to get on the same page at home, this episode will help you replace avoidance with awareness and action. Let's break the silence and build a healthier money story together. Let's dive in. Kathleen, welcome. I am so excited to have you here today.
I am really excited to have this conversation, so thank you for having me on.
All right, let's just dive in. So I know that you are an expert in the space of money silence. Can you tell us what that even means and why it's important to us?
Sure. Money silence is that uncomfortable feeling that many of us get either at home or at work when we're communicating around money. And it can be about the dollars and cents, but often it's about the feelings we have about money, about how we make money, manage money, negotiate our salary. And so money silence is that taboo against talking about all those things. And it affects over half of Americans. So it's a big problem and we need to break through it.
Why do some people experience it and then some people don't have a problem?
I find that most people have a little pocket of money silence. So they might be really good at talking about retirement or talking about their budget, but not so great at negotiating their salary. So it is an equal opportunity problem. It's great when someone doesn't have it, but the key contributors tend to be things like, and I hate to pick on parents right out of the gate, but family money messages growing up, what your culture told you about talking about money, negotiating, saving, spending, gifting. It can be mass media certainly has a major influence as to how we think about money. And it could be religion. Certain religions believe that it's okay to be profitable and others have the nobility of poverty. So there's all these messages coming at us. And the thing about money silence, Anne, is because we don't talk about money, we often think that our self-talk is somehow wrong or we're the only ones that don't know about money. But in fact, all of us have these, what they're called money scripts. All of these of us have these money scripts that are telling us how to save, spend, gift, and invest. And if our money scripts are a little kind of wonky, that can get in the way of our financial success.
How do you identify what your money scripts are?
I find that fun. It's a lot of what I do in the coaching work and in my training work. One of the best ways to identify what your money scripts are is to think about what were the messages that you learned about money growing up? What did your mom tell you? What did your dad or significant other caregivers? Really pondering kind of what did my grandparents tell us about money? And even if they didn't verbalize it, what were the actions of the people? Also, what were the significant money, this may sound extreme, but like money traumas. A money trauma can be as big as you've gone bankrupt in a business, or it can be as small as the first time I asked for a raise as a babysitter. It was never called back again. I've had that in the work that I've done. And it just impacts how we think and feel about money. And until you raise those thoughts, those money scripts to the surface, it's hard to then change them. But once you bring them to the surface, then you're able to decide, does this serve me or is this something that I want to change?
Yeah, so can you give us a couple of examples of either language or behaviors and actions and like things that we learned, saw, heard growing up and how that translates to the money script that we might have now?
Sure. I'll tell you one from my own life. So growing up, I grew up with thrifty Yankees middle America, and we were told that saving is good and spending is bad. Now, on the surface, that's actually financially responsible, right? But where it got into trouble for me is I got so much joy out of saving that I never would splurge or spend anything on myself. And when I started my own business, I had a lot of trouble investing, whether it's a website, whether it was a coach, to build my business and become profitable. So ultimately, I had to learn that in some situations, saving money is a good idea. In some situations, it actually makes more sense to spend it or to invest it or to gift it. And so on the surface, they may appear to be thoughts and beliefs that aren't harmful, but they can ultimately really impact your behavior because life is complicated, right? And if you're a business owner or a parent or just even a professional, there's a lot of different contexts which we need to, spend money, save money, gift money, whatever it might be. And quickly, another one might be, say you're an entrepreneur and you are worried that your client can't afford your fee. If you worry about that so much, what ends up happening is then somebody starts to feel really anxious when they're talking with prospects. They may even sweat. They may talk too much. And ultimately, what ends up happening is the outcome is many people will negotiate against themselves. So they have a set fee. They've worried about it. They haven't said anything to the prospect. And now all of a sudden, you're smiling. Maybe you identify with this. All of a sudden, you've discounted your fee and you haven't even told them your real fee. And so shifting that thought about, okay, I don't need to mind read. This client may or may not be able to afford my fee, but I have to just do a good job communicating it. That can really change that cycle and allow people to ask and get paid what they're worth.
So when I first became a coach, I had a really hard time stating my fee. And I actually worked with a coach very, very briefly. He actually coached me on the spot and he helped me identify that I had this mindset of money is the root of all evil. And if I believe that, then I believe that asking for my fee is not good. And so we had to kind of unravel some of that mindset that I had because it was preventing me from actually asking for my fee. And it's exactly what you just said. Like I would in my mind just start negotiating against myself. Like, oh, well, maybe they don't want to pay this. They can't afford it. And then I would offer a lower fee. And I hadn't even said my original fee yet. They hadn't even objected yet,
It happens so much. And what is interesting is like I had another woman who has a thought that she's bad at math. And we started to meet. And I said, you're actually pretty good at math. And she realized, wait a second, we went through all these situations where she was going through a divorce. She was really good at figuring out finances. And she goes, that is no longer true. I said, no, you are great at math. Same thing. It's hard to see it in yourself. It often takes somebody else noticing it, a mentor, a coach, an advisor, if that advisor is trained in money psychology, to get you on the right path. So I'm glad you had that impromptu coaching.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you say that she said she was bad at math because I like to joke that I'm not a numbers person. So if I'm saying that, what are some of the ripple effects that kind of mindset could be having in other areas?
Well, it could be that you say that you're not good with numbers, so you abdicate financial responsibility, maybe to a partner or somebody in your business. It could be you're not good with numbers as a way of maybe not looking at financial goals in your business. I mean, there's a variety of ways, but often with somebody with that thought, and again, you're smiling, it could be that, yeah, it could be that you avoid those conversations. There's also people who are overly focused on money. So they become so caught in the minutia of what's coming in and out of their business or in and out of their lives. So that's the whole other side of it. It can be a problem. The whole goal is to find some middle ground where money ebbs and flows, and you're not perfect around it, but you are taking care of it.
So what do you recommend for the couples that might be listening where they've got the two extremes, the two different dynamics? One is obsessed and the other one is almost flippant about it. How do you suggest that they navigate and come to some sort of happy medium?
Well, what's interesting, we all know that saying, right? That opposites attract. And it is true.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people who are savers will attract spenders, just to simplify it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I encourage people to do, instead of making your partner wrong, get curious about how they think and feel about money. So start to understand, what were they taught growing up? What are their beliefs around different behaviors around money? What do they like about their relationship with money? What don't they like about their relationship with money? And so instead of doing what couples typically do, and I certainly have been married 28 years, together 33, have certainly done this, is we tend to blame, like, you're spending too much or you're too cheap, as opposed to taking a step back and going, I wonder why right now is a time where you feel like you need to buy drinks for everybody in this bar. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we can't afford this. So it's really taking that step back, which isn't easy to do, but if you both consciously try, you can do it.
So, if somebody is now listening and is creating awareness that they've got some sort of money silence habits or some messages from growing up that might not be serving them well, what exercises, what tools, what tips do you have for the listeners to rewrite their money narratives?
I love that question because, first of all, there are a lot of tools, and I'll tell you about some of them that I've developed, certainly some others that are out there, but also the fact that you can change it. That's what we need to hang on to. It's like anything, until you recognize that it might be a problem, it's hard to change it. And so my book called Breaking Money Silence is full of different exercises that allow you to think about, what are my money scripts, or what is my money story? Same thing. A money story is a collection of all the scripts. Where do these money thoughts come from? We don't spend a ton of time on that, but a little, just to bring it in awareness. And more importantly, how do you go about shifting and changing them? And so there's a method in the book. It's called the MOM method. That was, my acronym at the time. It's not exciting, but it stands for Mind Over Money Mindset. And so it takes you through a process, which is pretty simple. If you've ever done cognitive therapy, you probably would recognize this, where you just identify, is this a factor of feeling? Is this a thought that's serving me, or is it not serving me? And then you start to challenge it. What's another perspective? How else might I look at it? This is where your partner actually can be really helpful. You can say, this is how I think about this. And they can go, I don't think about that like that at all. And so that different perspective. And then you decide, okay, how am I going to rewrite this? And I actually encourage people to write down the new money message. So for me, it might be spending makes me nervous, because my natural money personality is to be a little cheap, to be honest with you. So my new script is, I may feel uncomfortable spending money, but I have it and I deserve to buy a nice thing for myself. A little long-winded, but I repeat that when I get nervous. Eventually what ends up happening, which is cool, is that our brains actually get rewired. So when I was 25, I was incredibly nervous about spending money, to really my detriment. Now, I almost wish I was a little bit nervous about spending money, but it happens like that because I've retrained my brain that it's okay. I'm never going to be that person that's an overspender. It just isn't in my DNA. So it's really taking time to go through those steps in that exercise and really shift that mindset. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that does. And what I want to call out is that the new mindset was not the opposite. It was creating acknowledgement, like awareness that you have this, and it was a small shift. It wasn't the complete opposite.
No, yeah, that's really important, because it needs to be a stretch. Like, you're not going to feel like automatically you believe this, but I also really truly believe in the work that I do. It needs to be something that's authentic to you. So what might work for you, Anne, might not work for me. The other thing that you can do, and you can actually do this with younger people as well, is you can draw a family tree, just like you would draw any family tree, except for the question is, what did mom and dad, or what did grandma, or what did Uncle Billy think about money? Like, maybe you can't ask them. If you can, that's great. It's a great way to start a money conversation. But what do you think? And that way you start to see across the generations and down the family tree how certain money messages are either passed down. I came from a very thrifty, like I said, family. My Nana Mo, I don't know if you know what Filene's Basement is, but it was a really big thing in Boston, Mass, which is saving money. And then there's also people that go completely the opposite. So it may be that my reaction is to follow what my grandmother does, where somebody else might say, I am never going to scrimp like that. I'm going to have the best of everything. And they kind of overcorrect the other way.
So it's interesting because I know a lot of refugees that came over from Vietnam during the war, and they were living these very abundant lives, and then they came over with nothing.
Hmm.
I feel like that has completely changed the money script of those families. And I noticed that a lot of those families now have like a scarcity hoarding type mindset because they had extreme wealth and then they came over into extreme poverty.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, that's a huge money trauma. Growing up, as a side note, but growing up, I lived on Guam and my dad was in the military. And when a lot of people came over from Vietnam, it was Operation New Life. And to hear and to intellectually know it, to be able to see it as a kid. So that's a money trauma that's really hard to get over. Think about, like, for people who maybe can't identify with being a refugee, think about like how we talk about people who went through the Depression. It's a similar thing in that the belief is, on some level, I could lose something any moment, it could all be gone. Because in reality, in that moment, it was all gone. And so it's a healthy reaction, and then it may become, for certain folks, an unhealthy reaction. And how do you let go of it a little bit? And how do you treat yourself? And have you seen people be able to loosen up, or do they kind of stay in that scarcity mindset?
I mean, I think it depends on the person, right? How
Yeah.
much work have they done? Have they done their coaching? Have they done their inner work? But I think it's hard to rewrite that. And then that definitely gets passed down generations.
Yes, absolutely. Even messages about work and being a hard worker or working several jobs. And some people feel a lot of guilt if they're making a decent amount of money and only working one job, because their experience growing up was mom and dad taught two or three, or excuse me, worked two or three.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's recognizing that we all have a history around money. It's called our money history. And that bringing it up and talking about it frees us to then make decisions going forward about how we want to live the rest of our lives around money. It takes work, it takes insight. It often takes somebody else who has a little bit of a perspective or training to help you at least get started. But it's definitely, having done the work myself before working with other people, it's definitely worth it.
If somebody is experiencing money silence in their relationship right now, what do you suggest as the first baby step to even take the leap into having a conversation? Like, what's the first baby step to break that money silence in the relationship?
One of the things I tell couples to do is to start a money conversation, limit it to 5 minutes. So we don't want it to be long. We don't want it to turn into a fight. It's a 5-minute conversation where each of you answer the question, what is one thing, could be small, could be big, that you are financially proud of? And that does a couple of things. One is couples tend to focus on the negative. They tend to focus on what's not working. And what we're saying is, let's take some time to look at what each of us might be good at or feel proud about around money. And then from there, you celebrate that you broke money silence. It can be that simple. And then make an appointment for another conversation. And you start to build up some safety. You can have a lot of conversations about money that aren't actually about money. And I know you do work around values. You can talk about, like, I'll give you an example from my own life, and it's in the book. Years ago, we had a coffee pot, like just a cheap, Mr. Coffee, and it was old and dingy and whatever. And so I was at a department store after work, and I saw this one on sale. And I said, it wasn't that much fancier, but it was on sale. It was $35 at the time. And I was like, oh my God, that's so great. It's on sale. I can replace it. I bring the coffee machine home. I put it on the counter, and my husband comes in from work. And he goes, we don't need a new coffee machine. I said, oh, yeah, we do. The old one's so dirty. He goes, but it still works. And so we don't fight about money much, but it became really clear in that moment, like, we did not agree on whether we should keep this coffee machine. And I did what I encourage people not to do. I kind of dug my heels in. Like, I am keeping the coffee machine. It's only $35. Long story short, the coffee machine sat there on the counter, not plugged in, not out of the box or anything, for a couple of days. And finally, I stepped back and did what I would do with clients. And I said, tell me a little bit about when you think appliances need to be replaced or when we need to invest. And he told me a little story about, he grew up with a single mom. They didn't replace anything until it was absolutely broken. And you could even repair a coffee machine that was $35. Where I grew up in a family where it was less about when the appliance is going to be replaced, but if it's on sale, Anne, we're supposed to buy it. So those money scripts were very different for us. And unless we got to that place of me understanding that's his money script, that's his mindset versus mine, I did the mature thing and I returned the coffee pot. So I just thought, you know what? That's not a bad thing. I could clean the coffee pot. And so sometimes it goes the other way where he'll acquiesce, but it kind of really highlights how couples can knock heads and you're not arguing about the real issue.
Yeah.
It's what's underneath it, especially when it comes to money and finances that often matters the most.
And isn't that always the case? We're not actually arguing about what we think we're arguing about. There's always something deep.
Yes. And I can also say, and I don't know how long you've been married, but if you've been married or even in partnership for a really long time, it's like, you're like, here we are again. We've had this conversation before. We've had this disagreement before. The thing that I like is we get quicker to like, this is ridiculous. Let's move on.
When does that happen?
I would say 20 to 25.
Okay.
But we didn't do our work till much later in our marriage. So maybe you'll be ahead of that curve.
I love that. Okay. So what do you suggest as far as routine check-ins around money for couples and for families?
I would say that couples should think about, and I think parents should decide and then encourage the kids to do this, but decide what is the frequency that's going to work for us. I would say at a minimum, it could be once a month. It is a check-in. Once again, I'm all for short and successful as opposed to long and drawn out. So maybe it's 15 minutes over coffee. Maybe you need to start with 5, but it's having a money conversation and you actually schedule it. I mean, it doesn't sound very romantic. It's not, but saying, okay, maybe the first Saturday of every month, we'll spend 15 minutes just talking about what's on our mind around finance or reviewing our statements or whatever the task might be that you want to do together as a couple. You have ground rules in that this isn't a time to argue and make your point. This is a time to hear the other person, listen to the other person, and for you to be heard. And then at the end of that conversation, I really encourage couples to pair it with something that they enjoy doing. My husband and I are big outdoors people. So in the winter, that might be we'd go for a backcountry ski, or in the summer, we might go for a mountain bike. Other people might think, oh, I don't want to do that after money talk. And they might watch a movie or take a walk or whatever it might be. And the reason you pair it with something positive is because we have so much head trash around money conversations and what it means to have these conversations and how they're going to be so hard, that if you pair it with something that's really nice, you start to think, oh, this isn't so bad. We have this 15-minute money conversation, and then we get to do something fun. And I find that when couples practice that, they learn a lot about each other and they keep the lines of communication open, which is all that breaking money silence is really about.
Also like a little reward for having the tough conversation.
Yes. And in fact, a quick example, I know a financial advisor who was practicing this with her husband, and she was actually the one who didn't like to have the budget conversations. She says, all day at work, I financially plan, I do all this stuff. And he very much was kind of in the weeds and needed to. So what she did, she goes, okay, so when we have the money conversation, I'm going to be on, what is it called? A Peloton? Oh. Yeah. I'm going to be at a Peloton. So I'm going to be getting my workout while you're reviewing the budget with me. And that'll make it so I don't dread it. And it worked for them. I mean, it's very creative. It worked for them. And that's how they started to have money conversation.
I love that. Okay. So what about for the parents that are listening? Because like, I know that, all our kids are going to need therapy regardless of what we do one way or the other. But like, what do you see as the path of least resistance? Like, what are some of the things that we should be saying or should not be saying that will harm our kids the least?
If only the generation before us said that, right? Basically, with kids, I think what's important is that you start early talking about money and you normalize it. So you know how we talk about nutrition with kids and exercise or movement, and it becomes kind of normal. And so it's building in those money conversations because people become aware of money in some sense around age 5. And the money scripts that get formed in our head are between age 5 and 15. Now, that just means that there's a real opportunity for you to give financial lessons, but also just talk about money and try to do it in some fun ways. Like, for instance, if you're going on a family vacation, maybe you give the kids each a budget, and it could vary depending on what their age is and what is appropriate. And you say, this is your budget. You get to plan one activity for the vacation. And so they get to understand researching and budgeting, and then they get to, spend the money when they're on vacation. So they get that whole experience, but you're doing it in the context of something fun. When somebody's new to work, it's sitting down and reviewing their pay sheet with them. And that's always eye-opening, right? When you realize how much goes to taxes and you really thought you were going to be making a ton. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa. It could be they go off to college and you get them their credit card and you teach them a little bit about how to manage a credit card. I really love when parents do it in a more natural kind of teachable moment way, as opposed to, we're going to lecture you about money, because nobody enjoys that, even as adults. In the book, there's some fun ways to kind of talk to your kids about money and figure out how to have these conversations. But early and often, and if you're listening right now and you're thinking, my kid is 35 and I haven't done it, never too late to start money conversations.
So if our kids are younger, what are some of the things that we should not be saying to them about money?
I think kids pick up on when parents fight about money, when parents are anxious about money. I think it's okay to be those things, but maybe to explain. One of the mistakes I see parents making is inadvertently sharing too much with their kids about how they're stressed out about money. It's okay for them to know at times money can be tight, and your parents might have different viewpoints on money, but we're going to work it through. But for them to be upset and worried about where money comes from, and I understand it's a privilege to not have to worry about money at that level, it's really good to not put that money worry on them. But I also think if you are open and honest and you're like, I am trying to do the best I can to teach you financial lessons, you don't have to be perfect with it. I mean, nobody's perfect with nutrition or exercise, so we don't need to be perfect with money.
So stressful, though, because I'm so worried that no matter what I say, I'm going to screw up my kids.
Well, that's a script, not a money script, that maybe you should work on, because you're probably going to give them all sorts of lovely things too.
Yeah. And even just over the weekend, my husband was ordering something on DoorDash, and he was explaining to the kids how he was going to order this one item because it was one of the deals that was like buy one, get one free. And he's like, we want to buy the ones that are on sale, like the things that are on sale. And now having this conversation with you, I'm thinking, what money scripts are we teaching them from having...
I actually think what that example shows is that you are teaching kids how to be aware and how to get the most for their money. So I think that that's healthy. Yeah. For me, it turned into too much because of my money personality, because I tended in my 20s to take everything to the extreme. So just may make you feel better, I don't know. But one of the things I'm really grateful that my parents gave me was the ability to be responsible around money. I just tried to do everything to the nth degree. Yeah, I think that's a great lesson. You're not screwing them up. There might be times where dad goes, we're going to go DoorDash and we're not doing 2 for $1 and we're having a treat, because every once in a while it's okay.
What
balance
that we can be doing to teach our kids about money responsibility?
I think when they are young, I mean, it depends, like first, second, third grade, when we used to get the savings accounts with the little passbook savings. We know, I don't even know, you probably never had the passbook book, but I did. And so, opening up a savings account, giving them an allowance, but the allowance not necessarily tied to chores. Often with allowances, it's kind of like clean your room and you get a quarter. Later in life, that's okay. So, when they start learning about work. Early on, it's really about, you're a member of the family, you have to do certain things, and so you're going to get an allowance and it's your pay, and it's kind of like you're practicing with money. The jar exercise, where 1 jar is for saving, 1's for spending, and 1's for gifting. And I think gifting is really an interesting thing. Maybe annually having the kids decide, is there a particular charity that they're passionate about? They make the case for why you should give X number of dollars, whatever your family can afford, to that charity. And they learn about giving, they learn about giving back, they learn about looking at charities to see if they're spending their money wisely. So there's a lot of cool and different ways to do it.
Then let's shift a little bit, because I want to talk about how your money scripts affect you as a leader in the workplace, whether you're an entrepreneur or just leading a team. Can you share what you've noticed, what you've seen with how your money scripts translate into your.
I think when it comes to leading, and especially if you are either running your own company or you certainly are at the leadership level where you're in charge of, a P&L, it's really about understanding how your thoughts and beliefs personally may bleed into work and how some of that may be good and how some of that may get in the way. The easiest example would be somebody who started their own business, maybe is running, a pretty decent enterprise, but for whatever reason, never hasn't spent a lot of time looking at the numbers. Like, I have my expertise, I'm not going to look at the numbers. Then you get to a place where you farm it out, which is good to have a team, but then you're never really looking at the numbers. And so that avoidance, you might be able to get away with it for a while as a leader, but it could become problematic. Or somebody who doesn't, and this happens to a lot of women, I'm sure it happens to men as well, but somebody who won't leverage or won't stretch or won't take a risk in their business to get to that next level because it would include, going after venture capital or taking out a loan, and it feels just too risky. So it's really about what are the thoughts and beliefs you have about money and how does that translate into how you're running your business? I guess the last piece would be in your negotiation conversations. It's two-way. We often think of negotiation like I'm negotiating my salary with you, Anne, but Anne is on the other side of the table. So Anne, as a leader, also needs to learn how to negotiate and understand how your money mindset might influence how you're talking and negotiating with employees.
What about team dynamics? Have you seen this impact team dynamics in a way that you would suggest you should really interview for this? Because it could detrimentally impact your team if you guys have drastically different money mindsets. Is that something that's come up?
That's a fascinating question. I do a lot of work in the financial advising world and with related financial professionals. So it comes up in teams because of the way in which they're working with their clients around money. I could see it on a sales team potentially coming up in terms of coming together. How are we going to invest our resources? How are we going to approach sales? I could see that happening. But to be honest with you, haven't had a ton of experience really thinking that through in terms of the team debt. But it's a really interesting question that I will ponder.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because we're, newer business, so we're kind of see ourselves as a startup, and I would say for the most part, everyone on the team is very scrappy, and it would almost be hard for me to work with somebody who doesn't have that type of mindset. And I'm just curious if that's something that you.
Well, the thing that I do with people, it's called a money archetype assessment. And I have done this with teams and for presentations where everybody takes an assessment. It's about 8 to 10 minutes, and you get one of 8 money archetypes assigned to you. And each archetype has, this is in general, you have to process it with the person, but in general, certain ways in which they are around money, around business, around how they approach life, because money is often a reflection of how we are in the world. So earlier I called myself cheap, right? And I no longer am. But I was restrictive in a lot of ways. I was restrictive in terms of fun. I overworked. I was restrictive in terms of food. So money can really be a reflection. My guess is it would be interesting to do the money archetypes on your team and see if people have very similar archetypes. I actually think a little bit of a blend is good, but there are certain archetypes like an accumulator is an inner banker. They tend to be scrappier, and that's my money archetype. Alchemists tend to be really creative. They don't tend to be overspenders, but they tend to worry less about money than accumulators. And then you have like celebrities who are very into bling. Everything has to be VIP. And so chances are you don't have a celebrity on your team, or you have one that's like, running undercover.
Yeah. Is that a quiz that is in your book, or is it something that you're able to share?
It is not in the book. It is something, if somebody is interested, you or someone who's listening in, they can just email me and we can talk about how they can take that assessment. It comes with an assessment and then a half an hour debrief with me. So there is a fee attached, but it would be well worth your while.
Okay, so what else have you seen as far as money mindsets and how it affects your leadership in the workplace?
I think in terms of if you think about different mindsets and you think about different money personalities, I think it's going to affect how you show up. If you are somebody who's always worried about money, is very obsessed about money, you're going to have more, and I'm scrunching up, like a more restrictive viewpoint of life. You may be often people that are like that around money tend to be more perfectionists. They can be a little bit harsher, where somebody who is a different money personality with a different set of mindsets might be more free-flowing, more open, more collaborative. Again, there isn't a good or a bad. I think when it comes to lead, the challenge is, and in even working with end clients, it's kind of like, I have the way I am in the world. How do I make the other person, the people I'm leading or the people on my team or the client I'm working with, how do I put myself in their shoes and not make them wrong because they think about this thing called money differently? We can learn so much from each other if we step back and we just get curious about how other people think about money in the world. And you know this from the work that you do. Money is just a different lens to look at it.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to ask one last question about your legacy with regard to money. So, how can families align their values and their purpose with the legacy that they want to leave through the lens of their money scripts?
That is an awesome question. There is a lot of work that can be done, and you're doing some of it, where you identify what are the core values that we have as a family. And then how do we talk to the next generation about these values? And in the context of we've created a certain amount of wealth, maybe we're passing on the business, maybe we're passing on the wealth, maybe we're third, fourth generation. But it's like, how do we communicate that we are using our money in order to express those values and tying the two together? And often that requires really some coaching of mom and dad to be able to, or just mom or just dad, depending on the family situation, to get on the same page. And then thinking about how do we raise not only financially responsible next gen, but how do we also help them understand that we'd like them to adopt our values? But it's okay if the way they express those values is slightly different. And I'll give you a concrete example. One family, the first generation that created the wealth, was really into Habitat for Humanity. They had a value of giving back. They had a value of making sure there was affordable living. It was really, really important to mom and dad. Next gen said, you know what? We've grown up going on the Habitat for Humanity stuff, and we appreciate that, mom and dad. We'd like to do a spin on that. And so the family, along with some help, was able to have a conversation about that. And where the next gen landed, I thought was really neat. They very much wanted to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what they did, instead of bringing that somewhere else, they actually donated and started a program at Habitat for Humanity. So it's a great way of honoring mom and dad's family values and then moving it forward. And so I think philanthropy is often a great place to experiment with that, to teach kids about it, and to have conversations around it.
Okay, so if somebody is listening and they're curious, can you share how you work with clients? Tell us about the coaching that you do.
Sure. I work with clients in two different ways. One, I coach people individually and in groups. Some groups are for business owners around how do you break money silence at work? How do you unleash your true value, which is basically charge and ask for what you're worth? And that can be one-on-one, like I said, or in groups. I also do training and coaching and consulting primarily with wealth advisors, estate attorneys, law practices around how do you communicate more effectively with your clients around legacy, around passing down wealth, and around breaking money silence. So those are the two different ways. And the through line is always around increasing self-awareness around our relationship with money so we can be healthier at work and at home.
Then tell us about your book.
Breaking Money Silence is, I've written 5 books. This is my 5th. The second edition came out in 2025, and Breaking Money Silence is all about shattering the money talk taboo. And so the first part of the book really talks about all these things we've been talking about today, Anne. It's money mindsets, money history, money stories, bringing that all to the surface, and then what do you do about it? And the rest of the book, the majority of the book, is actually a roadmap for how do we engage in these conversations with our kids, with our partners, with our aging parents. And then this new edition has a bonus chapter, which is how do we break money silence at work and ask and get paid what we're worth. So you can go to Amazon or anywhere and type in Breaking Money Silence and it'll come up, and I would love for you to check it out.
And we'll include the links to all of that show all notes. So can you share about the downloadable that you're going to share
Yes.
with the listeners?
Yes. One of the things that often I'm asked is, okay, so this all sounds good, but how do I prepare to break money silence? And preparing is really important to not go in cold. So I have just a one pager that you can download. You're going to put the link in the show notes. I'm afraid I'll misquote it, so I'm going to leave it there. And basically, you just follow steps 1 through 10 to prepare yourself to have a money conversation. And if you're a couple, you can take 2 copies, you can prepare individually, and then spend that 10 minutes having a conversation and then go have some fun.
Thank you so much for being here today. We'll include all of those resources in the show notes. I appreciate you so much. Just all that you shared today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anne. It was really, really fun to break money silence with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Empowered Living. I hope today's conversation sparked some inspiration and gave you tools to live more intentionally in your family, work, and life. If you enjoyed our episode today, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or actionable takeaway. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them, because living an intentional life is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, the life you want doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. Let's keep creating it one step at a time.